All right, welcome everybody to an ecosystem session and AMA. The first joint ecosystem since October, since our pivot. It's really nice to have all of us back together here sharing the stage. I'm Eric Harris Brown. I am the executive director of the Holochain Foundation. And with me are Mary Camacho, David Atkinson, and Arthur Brock. And we're here to be together and share about the progress that's happened since our reorganization or since beginning our reorganization, which continues to be in progress over these last 5 months. And so I want to set a little bit of context about all of this, what's happened before we dive into the updates on where we've gotten since there. And that context for me is really important because we made some promises back in 2017. We made promises to do three things. We made promises to deliver a truly distributed application framework that delivers applications not beholden to intermediaries, and that's Holochain. And we also promised to connect that to the current world, to the Web 2 world, by creating infrastructure, that's holoports and holo hosting, that could connect this new way of having distributed applications. And then we also promised to deliver a productive capacity-backed value tracking mechanism for that infrastructure, HoloFuel. What we did is we did this under one roof by incorporating Holo as an organization to produce all this value. And it turned out that that was really hard to do. That organizational structure in the end got in our way, and that was our pivot that we began in October. And what's really exciting to me is that pivot has turned out to really be producing results. It is by separating into three organizations, which I think we've got an image of. Nathan, if you can put up this the image of what we have done. What we've done is we've moved from a place where Holo was the one operational organization, which was trying to deliver all of this integrated value of our promises, to three different organizations: the Holochain Foundation, which is a not-for-profit owner of Holo Hosting, and a new organization, Unyt. That Unyt is the one that is going to deliver on the currency side of things, on the value tracking mechanism, the accounting mechanism of HoloFuel in its enhanced operational capacity, or the enhanced way of doing it. Arthur will talk about that soon. This is our new structure. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn it over and let David and Arthur and Mary speak a little bit, if they would like, about this context. And then we can dive into what we've done and what we've accomplished in the last 5 months. Who wants to take it on next? David?
Yeah, well, I'll have to jump in. Yeah, thanks so much, Eric, for sharing. Yeah, I mean, for me, as Eric was saying, basically came down to the driver for the restructure came down to the fact that we realized that we were building three separate products slash organizations with different motivations and goals. One's a not-for-profit, one's a for-profit, one's currency and accounting system. And we realized that no matter like the best intentions, and actually I think our best intentions kept it together for a very, very long time, and all of the capability to build really strong relationships kept it in that single structure. But when we stripped back and looked at it, having trying to funnel all the motivations, intentions, goals, deliverables into one overarching structure was holding us back. And I mean, Art and I have been focused more in the Unyt space. So we could chat a little bit about that, unless Mary, you want to jump in the Holo space. But I would say it is completely unleashed both the focus, the creativity, and the excitement. We've shared at a couple of different AMAs. We've had 10, 15 groups testing our alpha application, really fantastic feedback, and moving into almost like being pretty close to feature complete to move towards a more mature release of what we're working on to start to get some more groups onboarded and do some further testing. I don't know if you want to jump in anything on the unit front?
Yeah, totally. I'm actually looking forward to. I think we should each be giving the progress updates, on the orgs. But yeah, what you were talking about in terms of feature complete, Joel and I were reviewing the features that we were requiring for launch, and except for some outside modules, like we wanted to have something like a Cloudflare service worker for dumping logs um, for light clients just to dump logs that are not actually running an instance. There's some things like that, some external components, but in terms of the feature completeness of the core currency engine, it is already there. Now we're still doing testing, and in fairness, the UI is not there. They have a UI front end built by a back end developer, which gives you access to all the functions, but is not really organized for understandability or user flows at the moment. And that's the front end development is still going on. But it's really great to kind of be there with the feature completeness. And so I just want to really touch quickly on the milestones we've accomplished in the unit side. So we have incorporated in the British Virgin Islands. They actually give us some of the clarity that we want in terms of what is and isn't regulated and what is or isn't a security and that kind of thing for the accounting work that we're doing in Unit. And we've redeveloped HoloFuel. It's no longer going to be called HoloFuel. In our context, it's another product, but it's now a generic accounting engine for peer production networks, which takes advantage of uh, Holochain's asynchronous capacities so that there are groups that can actually even set this up to function local first and offline, like where you can complete some things offline and then synchronize to the network and that kind of thing, which is a capability that Holochain has that most blockchains obviously don't. And so it just made sense to organize around that. Also, it's a generic sort of simple framework that is then configurable via raves. Raves are our counterpart to smart contracts, which stands for records of agreement verifiably executed. And that was probably the biggest new piece of development that we actually had to build, was sort of a smart contract equivalent being built in that actually is based on Holochain's logic of agent-centric and asynchronous execution, that kind of thing. And as David said, we already have over 15 groups signed up for outside groups. I'm not talking about Holochain Foundation, that kind of thing. These are actually outside orgs that are in phase 2 or phase 3 alpha testing of 4 planned phases. This is not forever alpha testing, but we wanted to get things as quickly as possible into people's hands so we could start getting feedback about whether the features were complete enough. And so that's where we're at right now. And what's cool is we've been building relationships with lots of other projects, deep in projects, AI projects, energy projects for doing this kind of testing for their infrastructure. So it won't only be Holo using Holo Fuel. There will be different alliances of different projects. Um, and just for clarification, what was Holo Fuel is now called Piecework. Piecework Tracker, not peace as in PEACE, peace as in pieces. It's related to output-based accounting that was kind of emerged in the industrial age, like assembly line stuff, people building different pieces, or sweatshops sewing pieces of um, garments, or it's even used in agriculture based on the amount of fruit that you harvest, that kind of thing. So it's a way of being able to measure value in peer production networks. And this is one of the things we're really trying to help define, this peer production network kind of thing, which could be like, you can think of it like an Uber type of thing, like a platform cooperative, or things where you have various people that are organized with a coordination layer to be able to provide value. And that could be open source projects, it could be ride sharing, it can be decentralized physical infrastructure, deep-in projects on blockchain, local communities, other kinds of blockchain projects isn't only blockchain and digital age stuff. It also even happens in local communities and stuff where you can set up this kind of piecework tracking. And one of the weird things about piecework is it's multi-unit accounting. So it's not only counting the payment unit, but it lets you define other kinds of units. So for example, for the sort of blockchain deep in type projects, it might be things like web requests served or bandwidth used or megaflops of processing, things like that. What that means is the accounting system actually gives you visibility, lets you create charts and graphs and gives you insight into the economic activity happening on there that isn't only measured in the units of exchange, but the other units of value being produced. And then I actually think I want to wait on these other two things because they are more emergent. Let's come back to that after other people have shared their progress. Mary or Eric, do you want to share about what's happening in Holo or Holochain or?
Just Mary,
Oh,
can if you
go ahead.
can I just bridge for a sec? Because of the context of the AMA, I'd like to just create one bridge. So a lot of what Art just shared in the context of both productivity and restructuring, you can already see that we solved a series of problems for the hollow fuel currency. We were able to address market needs. We're able to go direct to a series of projects. We're able to bring in a smart contract like system. So all of these actually critical issues that we were facing in the monolithic structure, we were able to move with like freedom and alacrity and directly with consumers. Right. And so again, like we talk about like the part of the structure is we have such different markets, customers, consumers, audiences for these different areas, and trying to like roll them into a global overarching strategy proved very difficult. Whereas we're able to make a ton of lightweight progress talking to people, and we're like, oh, we have 5 groups spin up for testing, and then Art's in Denver, and then this happens and this happens, and all of a sudden we've got 15 groups spin up for testing, and it doesn't distract from what we're building, but it builds the momentum, and it taps into something we always wanted to do, which is build directly with people and build things that are really useful for people. But we don't have to go and create alignment with 35 other people to be able to do that or this or that or structure teams. We're able to just engage. So thought that was just wanted to give that flavor as like Art sharing. It's almost like a lived experience of the benefits of what we did back end of summer last year and coming to fruition over the last few months. Mary, I think you're going to give some Holo updates.
I'm happy to, or I'm happy to let Eric take the foundation and talk about Holochain.
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, why don't I just jump in real quick because that also sets a little bit more of the context for this. So I appreciate, David, the way you're holding it. It's really helpful. Like one of the core motivations behind the pivot was to be able to increase the speed of delivery of the parts by simplifying and clarifying the institutional boundaries. And so you can see how that's happened. When we have an institutional boundary that can move, decisions can be made more quickly, we can actually deliver on this promise. It just doesn't deliver on the exact same flavor of the promise, but we're actually delivering on the underlying value that we wanted to create in the world. And on the Holochain Foundation side, one of that pieces was the transparency of how to operate an open source foundation infrastructure that is really responsive to the world. And that part was often in, I wouldn't say conflict, but it was hard to hold all the pieces at the same time. And so what's happened, part of what we've been up to in the foundation is on the technological side, we've been able to go back and address the problems of too many features being integrating into the code all at once, which made for there not being enough edge cased and scale testing and integration testing. So the first thing we did was pull out the parts that were not certified yet and put them behind feature flags so that people who were using them could still use them. But in terms of doing testing, we could test the simplified part of the code and get to that sooner. That was delivered in Holochain 0.4. At the same time, we took our whole backlog of all these things that we knew we needed to do, and we reorganized the background and backlog and figured out where and what kind of release schedule that should be under, and we did it on GitHub. So that's been up and available for people to look at. That led us to be able to understand that the next step was to refactor the networking engine to solve some of the problems that were showing up in testing at the end of the summer that was like, oh, this is a real issue. It may not actually lead to what we want to have working. And so we've rewritten a networking engine, what we call Kitsune, and that is now being integrated back into Holochain. And you can see the progress of this in our roadmap. Further, we've done a bunch of work on our documentation. Build guides have been updated, and we have a self-guided learning curriculum that's going to be coming online soon. I'm excited to be able to share that very soon. But I think, so there's all this stuff that's working, and the team is humming away. The Holochain core team is humming away on its development, and in a way that feels really critical because, oh, so I'm sorry, I missed one piece. Here's the other big piece that we're working on, which is the testing environment that we call wind tunnel. So for me, one of the critical ways of looking at wind tunnel is to use the analogy of an airplane. Any piece of technology has an operating envelope in which it's safe to operate it. You have an airplane, which you can only pull back on the stick so far if it's loaded with so much weight and so many people at such and such a temperature, at such and such an altitude before the plane will stop working correctly. And having a testing environment in which you can measure the safe operating environment of that technology is a critical thing to have. So that piece of tooling, again, what we call wind tunnel, is been developed and is almost ready to be showing output of how quickly DHT synchronize, and so that people can actually count on and know ahead of time what they can count on for the applications that they're building, because it depends on what you do with it. If you're adding into your distributed hash table into the network very large chunks of data, it's going to sync more slowly. And if you do it at certain rates, it's going to take longer. And so the question is, can we provide developers the operating conditions, the measurements of what operating conditions they can expect to be able to know how to design their applications. So that's a really key piece of what we've been building out and is working and being able to test in a distributed context, both on new hardware and on holoports. Similarly, we wanted to be able to do that for the team. Can we measure our own performance, do estimation of the work that we're doing, count it, and be able to make projections on that and have a roadmap that says, this is what it looks like it's going to take based on data rather than what we hope is the case. And so that has been part of what we've done on the team, is taking the responsibility to do that. And you can look at the estimation in GitHub, and very soon the roadmap on the website will have a digested version of that to be much more easily and readily consumed by not people who know how to look at GitHub. At the same time, we have integrated our components team, which was responsible for the scaffolding and our runtimes, our launcher runtime, Kangaroo runtime, which is desktop standalone Holochain apps, and also the Android runtime. Those teams have been integrated into the core team, which means that when we're delivering stuff, it delivers with much more smoothly. This is, again, back into how to make the institutional structures work better. And at the same time, we've been spending a lot of energy on the foundation's operations, a strategic plan for the year, a comms plan for the year, expanding the foundation's council. A new member will be announced soon. Also working on a formal structure for how we create improvements to the Holochain ecosystem, kind of like the RFC pattern is used by the Internet Engineering Task Force, or the EIPs for the Ethereum Improvement Protocol, or pattern, whatever it's called for Ethereum. We are building out one like that for Holochain, and that's in progress. It's actually visible on our GitHub repo, but we're working on it. And we're working a ton, as much as we can, on communications. I already mentioned the live roadmap. We're going to be announcing a podcast to engage people in the wider community on the bigger issues of what Holochain can why Holochain is a useful thing in the current world environment. We're working on in-depth blog posts where we've upped our regular dev pulses, and we're doing as much as we can to be better in our interaction on the dev.hc, our Discord, and our socials. So hopefully there'll be more to come on that. So like David said, it really does feel like being able to move into this independent operational holochain as a foundation is helping us meet this goal of that side of the whole project, open source infrastructure. And with that, I'm complete. Mary, do you want to talk about what Holo's been able to do in these months?
Yeah, totally. This is great. So I love hearing this live. It's been a while since we've all been on the same space talking all together. We've kind of met in various groupings over the course of the last several months, mostly. But just like everybody else that's listening right now, when you hear some of the updates that are being said, it's a little more tangible listening like live to each other about what's happening and what kind of a difference it makes. Hearing about the testing and like having data to show how quickly networks with data in them will sync. That's critical. This is one of the key things that VisVer is going to need, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But it's really awesome. This is what we want to be able to share with one another from our different viewpoints and perspectives. So kind of getting back to, David, what you said, increasing speed, making decisions more quickly to deliver value. 6 months ago, when we were, working on the launch, the big launch, and we were struggling to be able to support even customers who were also simultaneously trying to use our network, and it was difficult. We were pulled in all these different directions, trying to do everything at once. Now we're ordering our roadmap directly related to what customers want and in the order that they want it. And particularly take a read. We just came out with a blog post recently. I think it was just pushed out last Thursday or Friday about why we built the new network in Holo, and I highly recommend that y'all read it. But I'm going to talk a little bit higher level than the actual network, and talk about the restructure and what difference it's been making for Holo and what we've been able to accomplish. One is just really a strategic repositioning. The thing is we were building a very, and this is in the blog post, by the way, a very structured, like monolithic sort of solution with everything all interdependent. And right now we've been able to sort of break that up at a technological level and position ourselves to provide core infrastructure and hosting services, not just to Holochain projects, but also more generally to provide the kind of infrastructure that is needed, that is both distributed and decentralized, to projects that are looking for alternatives from using just the few dominant big tech infrastructure providers and their resellers. That's one big thing. This brings along with it like an expanded market opportunity. I think, Arthur, you talked about it, about how you guys are engaging differently with other groups and feel freedom to go create partnerships and look at who needs what you're building and how to work with them effectively. Prior to restructuring, it was sort of difficult to be responsive to some of the market opportunities. We're constantly trying to make sure they fit in every way perfectly for everybody. And now, as we're completing some of the restructuring processes, we're much more able to create partnerships to look at how we can have that run on the Holo infrastructure, which is more generalized. And this kind of helps us clear the deck for some of the decision making that a for-profit hosting company needs to be able to make, whether it's going to be on capital growth or other types of collaboration. We're connected, but we're not so interdependent and intertwined that we can't make decisions that are appropriate for the different business entities or different business units. I think that's really a critical piece. So let's talk about some accomplishments. Yeah.
I was just going to say, it was funny listening to you there, Mayor. It was just sort of like interesting that maybe Holo and Holochain were a little too closely wed. And it's like in untangling that a little bit, there's like a little bit more promiscuity for other relationships available. And anyway.
All right. Well, okay. Now I'm going to really change the subject. So I want to talk about a couple of things that are happening right now. Holo gives delivery updates every 2 weeks. We send out updates. Actually, we send out written updates twice a month, and then we do our a delivery brief live on video once a month. So I feel like we kind of keep people up to date. And obviously, we put out a development roadmap just about a week and a half ago, I believe, or just after the last video, which really talks about what we're providing in each quarter this year. And this is really important because these are products basically of functionality that service customers on the new network. So it's really, really great stuff. But you can look at all that already that's been talked about. But what we haven't talked a lot about is hot. And so today I want to make a couple of statements about that. One is hot. We're going to be looking at making some enhancements to that. We've made a lot of progress in the last couple of months, ensuring that hot can be used as a utility on the whole network. And what that does is it unblocks one of the major issues that's really prevented any form of listing of hot in US exchanges. And now that we are a functional utility, we're in action to obtain a listing. We can't make promises, and I know we've said those words before, but we've never combined them with we're in action to actually get listed on US exchanges. So we're hopeful that with the changing attitudes, with the shift that now being a utility makes, that we'll soon be able to talk about real progress in this area, and we're excited to keep you up to date about how that's going. Second announcement that we're making around HOT is about a layer 2 integration. So we're going to be implementing a layer 2 solutions for the HOT token. And this is going to substantially lower gas fees for DEX transactions. And this particularly addresses users also in the US who haven't been able to access ways of doing this. So we're taking sort of a two-pronged approach and making sure that we take care of people no matter what. But it also is going to be helping out folks, and this comes at sort of in direct response to our community, our hot holder community, who has asked us to make it more able for them to do trading strategies with hot on DEXs. So these are two things that we've been listening about. We understand the needs, the wants of the community, and we're taking action to shift and complete and provide value directly related to the hot token. So we'll keep talking about those as we hit some of the milestones in completing that, and as we know more. So listen in on future updates about it. The other thing I just really want to say is Hot's future, Holo's future, is really still Holo Fuel. So those things are interim measures. Those things are things that make a difference right now. But we've been on a journey. It's been a long journey, and we know we're still on a journey. And so as part of our positioning, Holo established new core functionality on our network. It's more generalized. It's able to provide value to a wider set of customers. But the longer arc is to reincorporate some of the Holochain-based applications that we were building prior that enable more peer-to-peer distributed and decentralized functionality on the network. And that includes HoloFuel being the ability to make payments in that peer-to-peer context. So I just wanted to make sure that this was stated, is clear, and all of us here in the room that are talking to you today, this is our intention. But right now, what we're able to do is make choices for the here and now, for the short term, the medium term, and the long term, more independent from one another with more space, as Arthur was saying. So that's pretty much the Holo update. We'll talk more about our dev roadmap on Wednesday. Handing it back to whomever wants the baton.
Arthur, you said you had a couple more things.
I do, but I actually have put them down amidst the other questions, like where somebody's asking about related things. So I think we should start answering questions.
Okay. I am missing the questions that are showing up. For some reason, I don't have that doc. I apologize.
Hey, David, do you want to read the questions like you always used to?
You want to be our question asker, David? Thanks.
You're muted.
Yeah, let me just load it up. Okay, it's given his update. Cool. Yeah, so I'll just go from the top here. Am I the only one who questions how someone can be focused on building Holochain while simultaneously building other companies? Not just Mary, as I seem to remember other members of the team also building different companies at the same time. Maybe I'm wrong here, but I would assume, considering the project has had so many delays, that full attention and working hours would be needed from everyone involved. Don't get me wrong, I don't have any issues with this happening. I encourage entrepreneurs in their endeavors. I merely question if these additional endeavors impact the pace of progress on Holo and Holochain.
Well, I want to jump in on that one. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there's really nobody better poised to take advantage of building on Holochain than us. And it's certainly true that focus can be diluted, but we are at a point where we just need to be dogfooding. We actually need to be using the tools. And the more people putting them to hard use, to industrial strength use, the more we can sort out any remaining performance issues or bugs or anything like that. And in fact, each of us, all of us here on the call have our own projects going, Eric's got Lightning Rod Labs and has been building a bunch of important tools over there in Lightning Rod Labs, Moss and Weave and all the, collaboration tools. For those who don't know about it, it's like amazing the kinds of things we can do on Holochain with real-time collaboration, like Google Doc editing and spreadsheet editing and project management tools and peer-to-peer Zoom and peer-to-peer email and all that kind of stuff. But if without Eric driving that, I don't know that we'd be seeing those kinds of things. We wouldn't have it to showcase. And I'm working on things in the currency and accounting space. Mary's got her projects. I'm gonna let her share about here in a second. David's got projects that deal with cross-chain integration and different things like that. I think Holochain at this point really, really needs to be proven in the real world usage. And if it's us having to do some of that real world usage to prove it and have it have some killer apps, then so be it. But I think that's part of the ticket to adoption.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I didn't do a lot of work on anything outside of Holo for the last 6 years until just recently. And it took sort of getting, I mean, there's probably, and I think there's another question later on that's talking about some of the demand and supply and demand. And it took me sort of looking at, well, where do I really want to see demand? I mean, we've had questions over the past, I don't know, AMAs over the past 6 years that said, what do you really want to see built on Holochain? What do you really want to see built on Holochain? And a lot of the ways that, like you said, just now, Arthur, Zippy would answer that question and then he'd go work on something in the lab. And, going back a long time, I had some answers on that. And I haven't seen exactly what I thought should be built on Holochain or how something could be built on Holochain built. I think specific examples of how Holochain can be used by different kinds of companies that have clear business models and that use different features of Holochain or functions of Holochain are really needed in order to be examples for others to kind of open up how and what to do with Holochain. One thing, it's been a long time. We've had different versions of Holochain that have worked better and worse in different ways over the years. Some people did start building some things, and some of those sort of have gone by the wayside. But they're right now, I think it's critical that we have these things being built today. So I want to also say I was operationally running a much larger organization 6 months ago than I am today. It's really, really streamlined what we're doing in Holo. There is a lot more opportunity for leadership development within the smaller organization and the way that we're operating. And it is creating a little more space for me to be able to take on some of the things that I've said were important to me and provide some of these examples. So I think activating these things now is critical and is only helpful to the Holochain ecosystem. So I'm very much, all in on all of it right now. And yeah, there'll probably be changes over the course of the next 6 months as to how these things evolve for different ones of us. But yeah, that's my take on it.
I've got one answer to that question as well, because I also, like both of you have said, I've done stuff on the side, right? And it has to do with the organizational complexity as well as the actual complexity of what we're trying to build. And so to build something as different as we're doing, a distributed application framework like this, required a bunch of stuff in the ecosystem to work well, that it was really hard to say, okay, now Holo team or Holochain team, go pivot and do this. And so Arthur and I, like, here's one example. We saw, and this speaks to your thing, Mary, about what can be done. We saw an opportunity for doing and bringing into the Holochain world a different form of accounting resource, or this is REA, resource event agent accounting. And so we funded that and helped make that happen. Now, if some of you may be paying attention to what's happening over in that world, the HREA team combined with the Value Flows Network are getting a tremendous amount of interest and have built a Holochain application for what's called the Carbon Farm Network to track flows of value across a whole ecosystem and have it be adopted in the New York region for doing fiber shed management. And there are people who are looking at that and said, oh, we want to use that in other contexts. Now, how could we do this inside the context of Holo and Holochain Foundation? We couldn't. But having that available as a underlying infrastructure tool for doing ecosystem value flow management is really a critical piece. And so we took that on. Did that dilute our focus? Maybe. But the thing is, getting this whole thing to work together with enough partners and enough capacity was one of the critical pieces that we needed to do. So I can see why you would ask the question. It makes sense. But I think also what we did was a reasonable strategic approach and what we're continuing to do.
Yeah, I mean, agreed. It's a network demand model and a networked environment. So I think the other thing that's only missing from part of this, I mean, I think that the interesting thing about this question is the underlying assumption on what focus and success looks like. But I think the clue to the response is when Art was talking early on, he's like, well, I want to profile these features in these currencies because that's the core of what differentiates Holochain. And I'd say that for asking that question, if you look at the thousands of conversations we've had with builders on Holochain, for many years there was a mental pivot that people had to make, and so people would be looking to use Holochain for things that weren't necessarily the key differentiator of Holochain. Like for a couple of years, a lot of people were just like, it's faster than a blockchain. And so by having people intimately involved in designing, building the technology, building these first applications, we've said this from the start, it creates patterns that are much more aligned with the differentiators in the technology that then get replicated in the world. So it's actually a core part of the strategy. I think the underlying assumption is more like, if you're building Amazon, you would be, absolutely, you couldn't have a publicly listed company like Amazon or whatever and be doing multiple things. But they're like building an open source ecosystem with applications on top of it is a pretty different proposition. So I would argue that if you're not doing it like this, then you're not doing things correctly. And I think like there are a ton of other groups that successfully do the same thing. Okay, question for Holo, Mary, if you're ready for the hot seat. Yeah, I regularly see that at the moment there is more supply hosting than demand. What does this mean for Holoport owners when they get the Allograph network in a couple of weeks? Does this mean that many Holoport owners will not be able to start earning directly? Also, there has been a strong rise in demand in recent months that should match the supply before summer.
Feels like old times. I've spoken at length, for about the need for us to focus on demand, and that holoports will only earn money when there is enough hosting, or providing value when they are doing that service. And this is the way it works on every other network. We've shifted to work with a lot more external organizations who, as they grow, can add demand to our network. And we've made announcements about some of those partnerships over the past couple of months. The thing is, we're delivering more products also over the next few quarters that'll make it easier for a wider customer base to take advantage of our distributed network. So demand is growing, but it's not overnight, and it's not at the point of equaling supply. This is a slow growth sort of space. There will be times that'll go rapidly up when certain applications come online and have a lot of use, or if they get taken up and have immediately tons of customers who are perhaps using some of the cloned DHT hosting. I might be using some of the internal technical terms. Sorry, those aren't the product names exactly. But it's not going to be one like we turn on the lights on the new network on what people are calling allograph, which is just it's a way of naming the new network, but it's nothing really other than the Holo network. When this happens, there's going to be a growth of demand to come up to meeting the supply that we have. And when that happens, we're going to also be looking at how do we add supply, because it will come up, and it's going to come up that we need different kinds of supply for different types of products and services that will be offered. So there's going to be a lot of variety coming in the next 6 months, and we'll keep talking more about it in the Holo space. Okay, David stepped away, but I think we should move to the next
David had
question.
step away. I can read the next question. So the question says, I congratulate the team for the recent developments. I have a question. Real Gold, Visver, Certia projects are great for the ecosystem. However, the owners of these 3 projects are people related to Holo, Art, and Mary. I'm sure there are projects developed by people who are not part of the team, but if the majority are like this, is it possible that Holochain has not been explained or announced enough?
Oh, okay, sorry. Thought you were reading something else.
No, I'm reading the question. And shouldn't there be more people developing projects in such a perfect system?
Well, I'm sure there are projects developed by people who are not part of the team. I think we've been highlighting a lot of those in ecosystem sessions over the past year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. I even met a group building that I'd never heard of, never met before, nobody in our organization had ever met them when I was at Token 2049 last year in Singapore. So that was kind of interesting. But it does seem that the time it's taken to get Holochain really ready to work kind of for businesses at prime time, ready to take it out, has been longer than what we expected. And some projects have come and gone that were trying to use Holochain. They may have gotten stopped at different points in time. But the way I see it is that it's never been a better time than right now to be building on Holochain. And so that's why I'm excited kind of to be getting back to building business products and consumer products that really matter. These things will both build demand for Holochain to be functioning in certain ways, and they're building demand for Holo to be functioning in certain ways. And like I said previously, there are examples of ways that you can do it. And I want to say a quick thing about that, because, and I'll have more, I'll be writing probably a blog post. I don't know if that's coming out in Holo in a month or so, but the projects that I'm taking on are really different because they're not just a Holochain only type of project. They are projects where Holochain is a part of a bigger stack to accomplish a solution. And I don't know how many projects, I think I can think of one of them off the top of my head really that has been functioning that way. But most of the ways that people took on Holochain was like, I want to build this perfect thing. And that's not my language around any of this. Technical projects are not perfect ever. They are a compilation of doing what you can with what it works to make a solution that people need and want. And so with Certia, I'm looking at doing a very consumer-oriented, privacy-first, local-first project that is about health and fitness data, where Holochain is going to be used for sharing, which is one great thing that Holochain's good at. It's not the only thing that Holochain's good at, but it's the one that fits this project and is needed inside of that solution and that sort of stack. And with Visver, it's very different because this is around verifiable data, which if you've been listening to things I've been talking about or David's been talking about for the last year and a half or so, we've been out there saying verifiable data solutions are critical, and Holochain is an important part of what can provide that in the world. And so VisVer is an example of how that verifiable data can work with specifically file-based verification. So it's not the only thing. There's plenty of space for other people to go create projects, to create solutions. It's an example of how it can be used in a specific way that kind of hits a market where there's a need. And so I think this is important for people to really understand, for people to be watching, and also to inspire other projects that are similar or kind of hitting a different solution in those areas. So I'll stop for now because I feel like I'm on a little soapbox.
Yeah, but just to chime in, yeah, I think more people should be building on Holochain, but part of what I think has that happen is for them to see good implementations of things on Holochain and for the ecosystem to mature to have, better libraries and utilities and things that are being shared, solutions that are partially, that are built and shared where you can share components of things that other people have built. I think about like the Node JavaScript ecosystem and how many crazy little modules there are for doing things. It's like that's part of what it takes to have a development ecosystem become powerful. And I think that's happening. Guillaume has shared tons of things into the Holochain Open Dev stuff, and it's growing. And I think having our projects on it is just a part of having the ecosystem mature.
Yep. Yep. Agreed. Okay. So anything else to add there before we go on to Holochain, Bitcoin networks? Okay. Cool. All right. So does anyone remember when Art talked about making a version of Bitcoin in Holochain? Why not create a Bitcoin scalable layer 2 of sort to bring more people to Holochain, Holo, Allograph, whatever you want to call it? Holochain has the tech, just need to put it to use. They're already basically doing that with RWA and AI. No one seems to like the Lightning Network for BTC. Maybe some low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, just for clarification, when I was saying you could implement Bitcoin on Holochain, I wasn't saying you should. I was actually trying to point out that if you did implement a Bitcoin style app on Holochain, you would lose all of the performance advantages of Holochain by turning it into global consensus. So I think I was speaking of that as like a counter example of what you shouldn't do on Holochain. But that said, I for sure have already wanted blockchain projects to use Holochain as an L2, as long as Holochain doesn't get sidelined and perceived as only an L2 kind of tool. And I believe that some of the things that we're doing, and this is where I didn't announce some of those things earlier, I'm bringing them up now. Um, so some of the other things that have been happening is that the piecework accounting tools, actually, they set up a kind of asset in the token in them. And so we're creating an asset-backed clearinghouse and to be able to give access to the credit systems inside each of these piecework tracking networks. And we've also unveiled another project called Real Gold, real.gold, which is a currency backed by gold in the ground, which uses Holochain for an asset registry for all of to be able to register and manage and audit all of the assets backing the tokens that then get issued to different chains. So this is cross-chain work via Rain protocol, which is one of David's outside projects. So I'm using one of David's projects, or not David's also involved, but I on the technical side am finally using using Rainlang for cross-chain integration. So the point is these are the kinds of things that I think actually have blockchain people start to see how Holochain can be used in concert with blockchain as an L2, as a treasury management tool, as as the database that you can store all the things too big to put into blockchain. The ways that people use IPFS, those are some of the kinds of things you can certainly do with blockchain in conjunction with Holochain.
Yeah, I'd say also in our ecosystem, our signal to noise ratio is relatively high. So for things that are like significant and meaningful, we can look at what's happening in Vola. We can look at what the Holo's enabling. We can look at the kind of things Arda talking about. The example Eric was given in the region space. And I'd say that, like, going back to some of these questions that people are asking for, I mean, we've been doing AMAs with all sorts of different ecosystem sessions, etc., for 7-8 years, listening to different ideas. I'd say the world has matured a lot. A lot of larger companies will have like a blockchain strategy, a blockchain team. They're thinking about things in a way that's very different over the last decade. However, they're like a lot of most chains, it's the opposite. It's that they're deploying the same apps, they're fighting for the same liquidity with the same users, with the same focus. And when a group's trying to pivot and do things differently, in general, it looks very exciting, but the capability to build innovative things doesn't really exist to the kind of things that we're talking about on a blockchain. So I think like a lot of the underlying questions to me are like really come down to, are we effectively building things that people really need in their daily lives to run their businesses, to make their businesses more effective? That I think is the key question. Are we focused on these things, and are we bringing these kind of solutions to life? And for me, that the difference in the Holochain ecosystem between this and a lot of other ecosystems is genuinely the focus of everyone on this call and everyone in the ecosystem is to solve these real problems in a series of different domains. So I think it's actually, as I said, like the signal to noise ratio, I think, is really, really good. And the kind of problems that people are solving pretty exciting, actually. And the ability, like some of the stuff, we won't do it on this session, but some of the stuff that Mary and Liz are talking about with Visver in their launches and announcements and the potential partners really points to this. The capability to go deep across supply chain and institutions relatively quickly because of the groundwork that's been done over the last 10 years in decentralization, but actually to solve some of the problems that people have been butting their heads against. I think I'm very excited for the next little while. Sorry, I went off on a tangent. Okay, so next question. Do you still plan to build a peer-to-peer marketplace for HAPS? Eric, I'm going to skip to the hotline in a sec.
Yeah, the answer is yes. In fact, actually, the launcher includes the peer-to-peer app store. It's right now there's some key things that need to be added to it for it to be deeply usable, which is the notions of curation and accountability. In the centralized world, a single organization can cut people out, can do the vetting. In the decentralized world, we actually have to have a much more complex pattern for that, so to keep people safe for the types of apps that might be put up. And so it'll take a while for us to get to one that I would consider safe and certified. And so the current one exists, it's there, but it'll be a while before one that is at scale can be used. In the meantime, over in the Moss world, we have done a centralized version of an app store because we want to be able to solve the problem of curation and accountability. And that allows people to spin up their own little curation lists for tools and have them show up in the library in the Moss world. So this is an ongoing project that we're working on.
Excellent. What is the long-term utility of the hot token, and is it still a placeholder for a future token? And is Holofuel still a thing?
Holofuel certainly, I think it's become a bigger thing. It just isn't going to be called Holofuel exactly anymore. I think the opportunity of Holo actually being in a network of deep-in projects with cloud hosting and GPU processing and Wi-Fi sharing and Bluetooth tracking and those kinds of things actually joining the same piecework tracking tool, it actually increases the utility of hot and being able to be redeemed in for those different uses. And I think hot and holofuel are going to coexist for quite a while. Hot is the kind of, I mean, hot, there's what, 110 trading pairs out there on like 40 different exchanges. The market that hot reaches would be very hard for us to reproduce in holofuel right now. And so for that, it has its own utility. It actually has a fair amount of maturity as a token. Right now, if you're launching a new token, it's very hard to get the kind of reach that hot currently has. So I know the price is low, but the reach is still high at the moment. And so as its utility increases and people see the ways that they can use it on here, we hope that also rectifies the price.
Right, and that's a large part about why we're putting our attention to it right now, to make sure that we're enhancing its availability and enhancing people's ability to use it in secondary on layer twos, because it's not going anywhere anytime soon. And even when we're using holofuel, we had talked about having holofuel and hot both existing simultaneously. It matters, right? This is something that could be a mechanism of supporting the interaction and with holofuel or whatever name it's going to have as it gets as y'all mature the applications and sort of the infrastructure that we're going to be transitioning to eventually. So like I said, we have a long arc on this, but there are going to be many stepping stones and stepping stages in between. And I think right now we're focused on the ones that are coming up in front of us. Art and David have been talking a lot about the successes of getting the application functional to do exactly the kinds of transactions that are necessary. But I think this is going to be a really interesting next year as we kind of lay out and test more of these things going forward. I'm super excited to see what happens.
Yeah, and I just want to say,
I want to weigh in on this too,
go ahead.
because the place I want to weigh in here is the philosophical place and the intentions place and the promises. So I said this at the beginning. The promise was to deliver a productive capacity-backed mutual credit system. And we figured out how to do that and theoretically how to do that for the productive capacity being backed was hosting. So the pivot now is to increase the scope of the types of productive capacities that can be backed by this kind of accounting system. And for me, that's an incredible win. It's a little weird, right? Because we're saying, oh, we're doing something bigger. But it turns out that because we can simplify and actually create the underlying capacity to create that kind of systems instead of have a one-off for just hosting, we're delivering even more. And we'll be able to actually do that in the hosting case as well. So that is part of how I feel like we're staying in integrity and living into the promise that we have philosophically from the beginning.
Yeah, and I've certainly never been more excited about what's happening in the holofuel domain, but I'm biased because I'm getting to work on all the cool new stuff and see all these groups, like how many blockchain projects actually end up needing this for their internal accounting, not just their external sort of trading. And they're just, it, oh, I forgot the thing that I was about to say about it, though. Lost it. Move on.
Okay, I think we've got a little bit more and a few final questions. So, um, you wanted to talk a little bit about market fears, or have you done that? You talked a tiny bit about it. Do you want to jump in and
Yeah,
talk
I
a little bit
mean,
more?
I just, hot price is low right now. Crypto's unstable right now. That there's, it's scary. And I think people also maybe carrying other kind of stress from other uncertainty and in the economic and political domains. But it comes out, and I just want to say that personally, almost all my assets are in hot and holo fuel, and I think that's true for most of us. Actually, it's not like we have dumped. I mean, I've never even been on an exchange that trades hot. I don't have an account on an exchange that trades hot yet. I'm looking forward to U.S. exchanges having being able to list hot. So I just want to say I'm truly doing whatever I can to make those things valuable and successful. We have not dropped the ball on the currency front. If anything, the project just has new energy and momentum, and a lot of adoption for it. So, um, and I know that it isn't always easy to see or understand what's going on behind the scenes with our project. And part of what I'm excited about here is increased transparency that I see happening in all of the orgs here. And I just want to say that I'm also intending to increase the transparency on the side of the projects in the currency domain. And we, in part, were a little slow to do that because we were still incorporating and naming, and we needed to register some trademarks and get our social names and domain names and that kind of stuff. We didn't want to like bleed too much information before we'd at least gotten some of those names nailed down. But now I think we're ready to start sharing a lot more, and I'm excited about that too.
Great. Yeah, I think that's good. I think that's covered what we wanted to share, plus a whole series of questions. Before we wrap, Eric, Mary, anything you guys would like to close with?
I just still, my thing out there is we in Holo, we get to talk a lot to the projects that are building on Holochain that are trying to sort out when they're going to need hosting and what they're building, and that's really exciting. And then all the hosts who are, working with us have been working with us for a long, long time, and I'm just present to the gratitude. So I just want to thank all the folks in the ecosystem that are either on the building side or on the hosting side or in the partnerships that we've made over the course of these past years and that are still working with us. I just want to thank you all for being there, for working with us and sorting out the new path forward as we go through this restructure. So we'll look forward to engaging more.
Yeah, I'll also tag in on that. One of the things that I've had the pleasure and also the opportunity to do, stepping into the role of the executive director of the Holochain Foundation, is to talk to some of the projects who've been with us for a long time and to listen to the frustrations that they've had in us not getting to be able to support their work as much as they want to, and really hear that and be more in connection. And I'm grateful for even the frustration and the upset that's been expressed, because that's been, in my experience, an expression of how much people have cared about what we're doing and can see that it actually matters. And so it does. And I'm really grateful to be able to have the opportunity to experience that. And hopefully we can really uphold that, increase our transparency, increase what we're doing and our ability to deliver. That's what we've been trying to do. It looks like it's working. And that's really exciting to me.
Super. Okay. So yeah, great. I think we've heard all about the pivot. We've heard about the way the Holochain Foundation's operating. We've heard updates from Holo, and we continue to hear from Holo with various. Sorry, it's not launch planning anymore. Anyway, the regular videos that Mary puts out and Q&A. Art and I have been on a couple of AMAs and hearing about Unit and piecework accounting, etc. So it's good to provide a little bit more context on how that was working. Yeah, thanks everyone for answering all the questions, the excitement, and I would like to leave on just one note, which is that yeah, we've been at this really since 2017-ish, 2018, 2017. In this configuration and format, we've been doing AMAs. I think, well, Matthew Schutte was doing some of the earlier ones, and it was a combination of the four of us, usually two or three, but talking about progress, etc., for nearly 8 years. And we're still here talking about progress. And so I think, like, again, a lot of the questions are generally framed. It's, questions are always there to design to build deeper understanding for the people asking the question and everybody around. I'd say the other flip that can't really be asked as a question, but maybe more happens through conversation, is there's a particular strength in the building of an ecosystem where you have people who are very deeply committed over a long period of time. Right. And when things don't work, they stick together, and then they continue to build and they continue to work away, and that grows and that develops. And that's true as what Mary was describing with the hosts. So we talk about hosts being frustrated, but what about the hosts that still believe so much and have their holoports on and are just looking for the next thing? And actually, for a lot of them, they've looked at alternatives. They've looked at centralized hosting networks that are really AWS, and they understand things takes time, and they're very committed to what the future looks like, or than the project that Eric was talking about. So I think there's a little bit of a different framing in the collective strength in going through adversity and obstacles, getting things wrong, getting things right, but still fronting up year after year and iterating and improving and getting to this critical mass of quality, stability, and opportunities, and then adoption will follow. So I wanted to just leave on that note and appreciate, as I said, like everyone who's been in the ecosystem, but also everyone here. Usually in the leadership and stuff, you would have some casualties and all sorts of things over the years. But actually, we've had a really, really strong core of people on this call, but also in the team and the ecosystem that just continue to believe. And with that, anything's possible. So I think we're going into the awkward silence now. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you soon.